How the fuck did Gus Fring convince Walter to cook for him one more time after he just said no to $3 million? Well, looking at these two scenes, I found that he makes use of a specific principle and 3 steps that got Walt to say yes, with the second one being one of the most impactful power plays that's as effective as it is subtle. But first, some context. In the entirety of Breaking Bad's insane run, it was here where Walter had to make his most important decision yet. To recap, Walt just cashed in on the biggest deal of his entire drug career so far.
$672,000 each.
For him and Jesse. But things just got sour after he feared he was losing control over Jesse, deciding to let Jane die, which eventually led to an airplane crash that resulted in 167 deaths. Moreover, Skylar tells him to leave home, acting on her suspicion that something is off. So, as Walt grapples with indirectly killing hundreds of people and desperately tries to cling to the life he cooked for, Gus attempts to convince Walt to bake the blue one more time, in one of the most crucial negotiations of the entire series, and it's here where we can observe the importance of the matching principle. Central to his best-selling book, Charles Duhigg explains that the matching principle is key to being heard in any discussion, and like they talked about in this video, one important thing to note is that one discussion can have multiple conversations, meaning that in a negotiation, if we want our offers to be heard and eventually accepted, we need to make use of this principle by first determining the type of conversation the other person wants to have in order to match it, making it easier to guide into the conversation you want to have, which unfortunately wasn't the case for Gus in this first exchange.
I'm done. I am not a criminal. This is not me.
I'd like you to hear my offer. $3 million for 3 months of your time.
This is where Gus fumbles the bag because he fails to apply the first step, which is recognizing the conversation the other person is having. If you think about a discussion as a house, then conversations are rooms, and reading them will allow you to reach the other person no matter what room they're in. This can either be practical, where we try to solve problems, emotional, where we express our feelings, and social, where we're putting emphasis on who we are to ourselves and to others. And in this scene, notice the words that Walt uses specifically in order to break off from this bad business.
I am not a criminal. This is not me.
Given everything that's happened up to this point, this doesn't just perfectly encapsulate Walter's feelings, the guilt he feels for causing the deaths of so many people, and the relationships he's starting to lose. It actually plays into his sense of identity. He's increasingly concerned about who he is or has to be so he doesn't lose his family. He wants to have a social conversation. However, Gus dismisses this and tries to throw money on the problem. He offers a solution, forcing a practical conversation, hoping Walt would meet him halfway. And this is how that went.
I have money. I have more money than I know how to spend. What I don't have is my family.
Because Gus didn't want to acknowledge Walt's identity crisis, Walt outright rejects his insane offer, after which Gus smiles with this defeated and almost irritated look in his eyes and walks away. But the negotiation is far from over. Though before we move on to the next scene, it's important to understand the factors that brought their paths back together again. After that conversation, Walt left his home and tried to force himself back in again, which made Skylar force Ted into her. To try to get back at Skylar, Walt is fired from his school after failing to rizz up the principal. And right after that, Jesse tells him that he cooked without his consent, which Walt took offense from because Gus actually paid Jesse and remarked that his product
Was more or less consistent with the quality I had come to expect.
But Walt knew this was a mind trick, still not wanting back in, before Gus took the negotiation to the next level, learning from his past mistake and applying this subtle tactic used in social conversations, which I like to refer to as leveling the playing field. In certain conversations or negotiations, the setting of where they happen actually affects how people make decisions, playing into their innate desires of safety and control. And for Walt here, those two things are hard to come by when you're A, discussing options in a place where your counterpart has full power over you, fueling B, the stereotypes of big bad corporations buying out smaller business owners like himself. So instead of leading the whole operation and delegating tasks like a boss would do, being bought out meant that Walt would have to sacrifice that power and work under a sponsor who would have control over his entire operation, one who could potentially corrupt his identity even more. So as Walt asks a question, Gus comes in and sprinkles this calibrated reply.
What is this? Your new lab.
By doing this, he doesn't just let Walter know that all of this could be his, he tells him that this is his space, a place where he can feel respected and afford the feeling of safety and control over his work and his product. But as he sees Walt is still on the fence, he drives the deal home with one of the most iconic lines in Breaking Bad history.
What does a man do, Walter? A man provides.
This is Gus acknowledging their shared identity, and it's a culmination of analyzing all the possible identities the other person may have, be it a husband, a provider, a business owner, and finding the one that both of you share to leverage that connection through vulnerability and make them listen. So when he says,
A man provides, and he does it even when he's not appreciated or respected. He simply bears, and he does it.
it seems as though he's being threatening and controlling, when in fact it's also him being vulnerable by allowing himself to express anger and knowing what Gus has been through working for people in an organization where his quote-unquote co-workers want him dead. He allows that emotion to seep through his guise and makes Walt know that he knows exactly what he's feeling, giving Walt both a peek into the man behind the mask and another reason to fuel his excuse to keep making meth. And just like that, Gus makes Walt reimagine himself, reframing his role from being a criminal to a provider, how it's his job as a man to bear the weight of an unforgiving world. And after Walt breaks up with Jesse and allows his wife to keep fucking another man, he finally agrees to accept his newfound identity and decides to cook for Gus Fring one last time.